Good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Pugh. As said, I'm the Director of Sustainability at Digital Catapult, and here's my colleague Sam from the Energy Systems Catapult. But today we're here as representatives of Advice, which is the AI for Decarbonisation Virtual Centre for Excellence, which is a collaboration between the Energy Systems Catapult, the Digital Catapult, the Alan Turing Institute, who represent academia, and the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero. And this program and this centre is all about bringing together the ecosystem from innovators, adopters, investors, and policymakers, looking at how do we use AI for decarbonisation. Now, this centre is launching in just 2 weeks' time at the Digital Catapult, just up the road in King's Cross. If you'd like to attend, we'd be happy to have you. You can scan QR code there to get a link. Now, at this event, we'll be launching 2 reports. One of these is talking about the UK's current AI for decarbonisation ecosystem. And then a second report on the day is going to be talking about how AI can be used and what the challenges that AI can support around decarbonisation are talking about. And Sam's going to talk to us about those today. Thank you.
Thanks very much, David. If you're going to apply AI to decarbonisation challenges, the thing you have to be aware of is the efficiency trap. So AI gets applied a lot in sectors like energy and manufacturing, but it tends to be applied to efficiency and cost reduction. And the challenge is that often that is not the place where there's really a blocker to decarbonisation. Let me give you an example. My first AI project at National Grid was working on computer vision for overhead lines, trying to detect defects, classify components, so that then we could automate the flying of the overhead lines and not have to have helicopters. That's great, reduces costs in the maintenance of the network, but the decarbonisation challenge is not high costs maintaining the existing network. The challenge is we need to spend hundreds of billions of pounds to build new network over the coming decades to connect renewables. And we see this quite a lot in the energy sector, AI being applied in use cases that don't really drive decarbonisation. So what we've been doing in Advice is looking at what are those systemic challenges that would be helpful for people to address with AI. And we've got kind of 7 big ones to look at. I'll run you through them quickly. The first is domestic decarbonisation. So if we're going to decarbonise home heating in the UK, practically every home in the UK needs a new heating system, and consumers need to change their behaviour. And installing those, getting the consumer buy-in, financing it, all of those are huge challenges. Enabling the net zero infrastructure is vital too. We have lots of renewables to build, but also lots of network to create. And actually, currently, delays in network connections are really slowing down renewables being applied to the grid and reducing our kind of carbon intensity. Maximising flexibility. Once we have all of those renewables, the real challenge is shifting demand for energy to when the wind is blowing and the sun is shining. And this is a massive transformation for the energy system. It requires new ways of consumers behaving and businesses behaving. It requires new models in the network. It requires new kind of underlying technology as well. In manufacturing, we've already heard about it a lot today, but the main point here is decarbonising the manufacturing inputs is often really hard, and it requires changing the processes, reinvesting in the whole plant, and actually how we can make that cheaper, make that easier is an area we should be focusing on. In some cases, improving manufacturing efficiency is the way to go, particularly kind of to accelerate the decarbonisation process, but not at the expense of like ultimately decarbonising the inputs. We've talked a bit about soil as well. Here, kind of soil optimizing the carbon emissions from soil and using soil for carbon sequestration, also really important. And the last one, kind of minimizing methane in agriculture, and how can AI help with that, whether that's optimizing kind of management of livestock or helping move consumers towards lower carbon diets. So those are the challenges, and there isn't really kind of a, oh, and AI, here's the obvious application of AI in each of those. What these are for is to help you understand actually digging into the systemic, less obvious blockers to decarbonisation is really important in choosing high impact use cases. So let me give you an example with decarbonising domestic heating. Now, it's not really a technology challenge. Heat pumps exist and are useful for a lot of homes. The real blocker at the moment is adoption. And why is this? Well, to start with, heat pump design is harder. If you have a gas boiler, you just need to put a really big gas boiler with lots of high temperature water flowing out of it, and it'll heat most homes. With heat pumps, they're really sensitive to exactly the temperature differences between the outside temperature and the temperature of the water. So you have to design the system, understand the heat losses in a lot more detail. What that means is it's harder for installers, and they kind of have a bit more of an inertia, negative perception of it. Plus, for years, they've just been putting a boiler in, and they haven't been having to do these calculations, and so they don't really have that skill at the moment. And if it's harder, and people aren't as skilled, well, it's going to take longer, be more expensive, and you're also going to have more times when it goes wrong and more quality issues. What that means is that consumers have a negative perception of heat pumps as well, not just because they're expensive and there's quality concerns, but as much because if the person who turns up to your house to install your heating system says, nah, don't go for a heat pump, well, you're not going to go for a heat pump. If you don't have consumers demanding heat pumps, you have low demand. And if you have low demand, you don't have the incentive for installers to kind of shift to installing heat pumps. And if you don't have installers, you end up with that lack of competition, which means you don't have that positive cycle of improved quality and improved cost. And that's just some of the dynamics in the system around decarbonising heat in the UK. And we've got these feedback loops which are slowing us down. So the question is, well, how can AI be applied in these situations? And there are some points where you should go, actually, we should really target this. So let me give you one example that's quite clear in my mind. It's around making the design process easier. So how do you automate the data collection? So for example, you have to do room-by-room calculations of heat loss for a heat pump. How do you automate the data collection? And how do you automate the kind of design calculations for that? Speeds up and lowers cost, but it also lowers the skill barrier for the installers. One where it's less clear, but still a key leverage point. How can you accelerate skills development? We have a massive gap in terms of heat pump installers. How can you use AI to personalize skills training, identify people who would be really suited, do augmented reality on-the-job training? How can we use AI for that? And then the last one, and one of my favorites, is really how can you strengthen that feedback loop in terms of the quality and cost pressure? And one of the big challenges you have with heat pumps and retrofit is, well, how do you really measure how effective they are? How do you not just optimize as you do it, but how do you have those quality assurance processes in place? And once you really have a good, strong, reliable way of doing that, that unlocks a whole load of new business models and new financing models like pay-for-performance. So that's an example of looking at the systemic factors in an area and finding like less obvious applications of AI. So that's kind of my call for you, is to, when you're looking at AI for decarbonisation, don't just think of the obvious things like let's optimize wind farms, but look at the systemic factors that are slowing down decarbonisation. And our report, which is coming out at the launch event, kind of has these, but also deep dives and lots of different kind of potential pinch points with those that AI could be helpful for.